Using the internal air compressor, I really didn't run any problem whatsoever cutting into this material. As you see, it's super easy to strike an arc. It welds very nice. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised on how well it laid down these beads. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today, I'm going to bring you along as I unbox and review this YesWelder FirstESS CT2050. So if you haven't already, please like the channel and subscribe. So let's get started. Today we're reviewing the YesWelder FirstESS CT2050. It's a 7-in-1 unit. It does AC/DC TIG. It does AC/DC pulse TIG, stick welding. It also has a plasma cutter that you can use two ways: the built-in air compressor or use external air. So let's go over some of the key features of this welder. Let's start with the built-in air compressor. It can run off of a standard 120 line. It can run off of the 240 volts. It makes it a great mobile unit. Another feature is the PFC technology. It reduces the energy consumption of the unit. Another thing this unit has is AC Smart TIG. AC Smart TIG works a lot like Synergic MIG. You select your material size, and all the parameters will actually fill in for that size. Some devices use high frequency start mechanisms that can produce electromagnetic interference that can be powerful enough to do damage to sensitive electronic components. This unit uses a non-high frequency start, which is also known as blowback, which is one hard requirement for CNC machining. Which brings me to my next point: the CT2050 is CNC compatible. Foot pedal and torch welding remote are available. The foot pedal is an option that you will purchase separately for this unit. So let's go over everything that comes with the welding. Let's start with the plasma torch. It's a nice heavy duty plasma torch. It's a different design from the MP200 torch I have. It has a ball socket attachment at the end, will give you nice flexibility while you're using it. It's got your standard safety. On the end here, it keeps the consumables off the table. You got a nice guide. It's beveled, it swivels. The bevel itself will help you drag across the material without getting hung up. The lead itself is, it looks like it's 13 feet long. Next thing we have here is we have your TIG torch. It is also 13 feet long. It has the large dince connection on it. The torch itself does have the ball socket end just like the plasma torch. It's got a thumb control. It also has an amperage control on the back of the torch. The head of it does swivel left and right, so you can adjust it for where you're welding. It's a pretty nice torch. It also comes with your consumables. It does not come with your tungsten, but it does come with 3 different size collets. It comes with your collet body. It comes with 3 different caps. You got a 4, you got a 5, and a 6, and you have a small and a large back cap. You do have your gas line for your argon gas hookup. You get air tubing. This is to hook up your regulator. Speaking of your regulator, you have this nice regulator. It's definitely an upgrade from what's on my MP200. You have your mounting bracket for it. You get Teflon tape. You also have your quick connects for your airlines. You have a 2-prong and a 4-prong adapter. So if you do actually use this for CNC, you can just wire it up, and here's the connections for the back. You have your 120 to 240 adapter. You have a 10-foot large dince ground. This earth ground is solid brass, very nice. And if you look close enough, it's copper. So this is a really nice ground. This is a lot better than what I've seen on any other YesWelder. The stinger, it is also 10 foot long. You got your DINS connector. It's standard Stinger. It's nice. It has a nice spring action to it. You do get a connection diagram, and you get a very detailed manual. Alright, what I'm showing you now is I have the optional foot pedal. It's a nice simple setup. You get the foot pedal and you get the cord to hook it up to the machine itself. And when you're under the display, you're going to put this in foot pedal mode. Let's go over the welder itself. Alright, let's start with the front of the welder. On the top, you have your display. In the center, you have your adjustment knob. We'll go over in detail more about that in a moment. On the bottom left, you have your positive terminal for your DINS connection. To the right of that is your gas line hookup. This is for the plasma or TIG torch, depending on what you're using, whether it'll feed air or your argon gas. To the right of that, you have your pilot arc connection. This is for your plasma torch. You then have your 5-pin trigger receptacle for your TIG torch. And then finally, you have your negative terminal for your DINS connection. Let's take a look at the back of the unit. Okay, now for the back of the unit, you have the 240 plug. On the very top, you have your two connections if you are to wire this up to a CNC. You do have the actual plugs that you'll have to hardwire, but it does come with this unit. You do have the on and off switch, nice responsive switch. You have two fans, two cooling fans. You have your air line out and your air line in for your internal compressor and the external, depending on how you have it wired up. You have your studs to hook up your regulator, which we'll do in a moment. Then you have your argon hookup for the back of the unit for your argon gas. To hook up your regulator, you're going to remove the two Phillips screws on the back. There are studs here to help space the bracket off of the fans. Once you have the screws unhooked, you are going to get the mounting bracket that comes with your regulator, and you're going to install it. Once the mounting bracket's on, you're going to remove the plastic nut, slide it up. You don't want to over tighten it, it is plastic, you don't want to break it. Just make it nice and snug. You are then going to grab two of your connectors. They do have Teflon tape already on there. This is your quick connect. So when you press down, that'll release the hose once you put it in. So we're just going to thread one on one side and one on the other. You will tighten it down, but just don't over tighten it. I'm using a 9/16 wrench to tighten this down. What you do is get your air line, cut a small piece off, and connect it in. Same thing for the other side. Okay, the way I have this hooked up is for the built-in air compressor. if you were to hook up your external air, for me, I would put a quick connect to my air line, and that's how it would come through. Okay, let's turn the welder on and go over to display. Okay, let's start on the upper left. You have your weld mode. You have the options of AC TIG, DC TIG, stick, cut with an external compressor, or cut with the internal compressor. Under AC TIG, on the bottom you have a choice of 2T, 4T, or foot pedal. The best way that I can explain this is 2T, you press the trigger, it starts welding. You release the trigger, it stops. 4T, you press the trigger, it welds. When you release the trigger, it's still welding. In order to stop it from welding, you hit the trigger again and that'll stop the weld. Let's go over the parameters. First, if you see in the center there, that is your current. The adjustment knob in the middle, you can adjust your current. We're looking at goes down to 5 amps all the way to 200 amps. Once you have your current set, you press the center knob. Your down slope goes from 0 to 15. Your stop current goes from 5 up to 200. Your next is your post flow. That goes down to 0.1 all the way up to 15. Your next option is your AC balance. The AC balance goes from 10 to 65. The higher the value gives you a better cleaning action, but it'll also burn up your tungsten a lot faster. The preset for that, let me go back there, is at 30, and that's where I'm going to keep it. Your next option is your hertz. The preset is at 85. It goes down to 20, all the way up to 250. I'm going to keep it back at the 85, that's where it was set at. Now the lower the number, the wider the arc. The higher the number, the finer the arc. Now the next option is your pre-gas. It goes down to 0.1, all the way up to 15. This is the gas before your arc starts. Your next is your start current. Your start current goes from 5 to 160. And then you have your slope, your upslope. This goes from 0 to 10. Now when you switch to DC TIG, you have all the same options except for you lose your AC balance and your hertz. When you go to stick, you still control your current. Your options you have are arc force and hot start. In the center you will see, or DRD, that is a safety feature. If it sees that the unit is in idle, it tries to protect the operator's safety and tries to minimize any chance of electrical shock. When you go to the plasma cutter, this is with the external air compressor. You go down to as low as 12 amps to 45, and the same with the built-in air compressor. It goes down to 12 to 45. Let's go back to the AC TIG. If you want to put this unit into pulse, you press and hold your center button for 3 seconds. And now you see you have your pulse options. First you have your pulse frequency, then your secondary current. Pulse frequency goes down from 0.2 up to 200. In order to remove the pulse, you press and hold, and then it goes away. Now under AC TIG, if we go to AC TIG Smart, you now have two options on the right. You have welding flat, welding vertical, or overhead. On the bottom here is your material thickness. Your first option is 18 gauge, 16 gauge, 14 gauge, 1/8 inch, or 3/16 inch. On the screen now is the duty cycle. If you want to review this, you can pause the video and take a look at the duty cycle. Alright, we're going to start off with doing some plasma cutter with the built-in air compressor. I do have my ground on the positive. I got my air line hooked up. I have my 5-pin switch set up and my arc start plugged in. I'm going to run this, like I said, on the internal compressor. On a side note, if you're running external air, you are able to clean cut over 1 inch thick material. When using the internal compressor, you'll have 80% of your full cut capacity. So let's get cutting. This piece of steel is a motor mount for an old compressor which I converted to an offset smoker. The material thickness is 3/8 inch thick. With the internal compressor, number one, it's quiet. This steel has paint and rust and cuts right through it. The beveled guide allows you to glide right past the metal, and it does really nice straight cuts. Using the internal air compressor, I really didn't run any problem whatsoever cutting into this material. On the same piece of steel, so it's 3/8 inch thick. Previously, on a different plasma cutter I had, I tried to make some cuts that was a little too thick for the plasma cutter I had. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the stick welder just to weld it back together, just to test out the stick welding. As you see, it's super easy to strike an arc. It welds very nice. I personally do not do a lot of stick welding, but I had no issues whatsoever welding this together. This is my first experience with using pulse TIG. I normally TIG weld with the foot pedal. So here I'm using the pulse TIG feature under smart mode, and I'm using the finger control. It took me a little bit to get used to it, but it lays down a really nice speed. Using the optional foot pedal is something I would suggest. For me, it's a lot easier to weld with the foot pedal. You're in more control. The crackling you hear here is because I didn't clean the aluminum that well. So once in a while you'll get that crackling sound because I should have cleaned it a little better. But I laid down a couple nice beads. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to run a couple beads without filler, and what I'm looking for when I do this is consistency in size, and also I want to try to get a nice shiny bead. My experience with TIG welding is, I would say, as a hobbyist. It's been a really long time since I've done any TIG welding. With that being said, I was definitely out of practice, but this welder did an incredible job. I'm definitely looking forward to doing some more TIG welding and do some future projects using this machine. I was able to get really good penetration, and the beads were consistent and looked really good. Alright, I'm switching over to DC TIG. I'm back on the pulse TIG feature with the finger control. I'm going to lay down a couple beads on that 3/8" thick piece of steel I cut off that motor mount for my old air compressor. Using the pulse feature did actually really well with this steel. It was actually fairly easy to lay down a decent bead. Like I said, I had no experience using pulse TIG. And I have to say I was pleasantly surprised on how well it laid down these beads. I found that this machine is extremely capable. The torch is extremely comfortable in the hand. Like I said, it's been a while since I did any TIG welding, and I had no problems whatsoever laying down pretty nice beads. I am definitely happy with the performance of this welder. The YesWelder FirstESS CT2050. What's my thoughts on it? This is a great welder. It really is. I like the AC/DC TIG, the pulse TIG. The thumb control does work very well. I do prefer the optional foot pedal. For me, I like welding with a foot pedal better. The built-in air compressor works extremely well with this plasma cutter. The fact that it's CNC compatible is incredible. So I would definitely refer this to anybody. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please like the channel and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.